All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking the incredibly complex, completely unprecedented strategy the U.S. implemented in the Strait of Hormuz during the 2026 conflict. This isn't your standard military maneuver. We are looking at a real-time, massive fusion of hard military power and intense economic leverage. We're going to stick strictly to the facts, the official announcements, and the major structural pivots that really defined this wild moment in global geopolitics.
So, why does this matter to you and me? Well, just look at the sheer gravity of what happens in this one waterway. A staggering 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas and 25% of its seaborne oil passes right through the Strait of Hormuz. Literally, when this strait chokes, the whole world feels it. At the gas pump, at the grocery store, in basically every supply chain. Keeping this artery open isn't just some far-off regional issue, it is absolutely crucial to the stability of the entire global economy.
To make sense of it all, we'll break this down into 5 parts: the initial crisis in the strait, the protective dome, the reinstated blockade, the 20% toll, and finally, the massive investment pivot. Part 1. Crisis in the Straits, the real epicenter of the 2026 conflict. The whole thing kicked off when the 2026 war erupted, and global energy supply chains were immediately thrown into chaos. Commercial shipping essentially flatlined. Insurers were terrified of missile strikes and drone swarms, so risk premiums skyrocketed overnight. Iran essentially tried to treat this international choke point like its own private lake, attempting to impose domestic regulations and threatening to selectively block any vessels tied to the US or its allies. This massive gridlock is exactly what prompted the US to step in with some totally unprecedented military action. Moving to Part 2, the Protective Dome and Operation Project Freedom. To pry this critical choke point open again, the United States launched Operation Project Freedom on May 4th. And the way U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth described this is pretty fascinating. He said, "As a direct gift from the United States to the world, we have established a powerful red, white, and blue dome over the strait. The goal? To throw a protective shield over commercial vessels to defend against Iranian drones and missiles. It was framed as this massive gesture to stabilize the global economy and keep sailors safe." But what does a red, white, and blue dome actually look like in practice? Well, we are talking about an unbelievable concentration of firepower. Guided missile destroyers acting as the frontline shield on the water, backed up by hundreds of fighter jets, attack helicopters, and drones. Plus 24/7 surveillance aircraft in the sky at all times. It's a continuous overwatch meant to spot and neutralize things like fast attack boats or cruise missiles long before they get anywhere near the merchant ships. Which brings us to Part 3, the reinstated blockade, an offensive chokehold. You see, this wasn't just about playing defense. Right in the middle of all this, on July 14th, the administration brought the hammer down with a strict naval blockade aimed entirely at Iranian economic interests. President Trump actually declared the U.S. the official guardian of the Hormuz Strait. That wasn't just a catchy title. It meant the U.S. was taking full operational control. They basically assumed total policing authority over exactly who gets to enter and exit this vital geographic bottleneck. It's almost a tale of 2 different shipping lanes. On one hand, you have international merchant vessels being actively escorted and protected by the U.S. military, so global trade keeps flowing. But on the other hand, for Iranian ships, it's a total blackout. Any vessel carrying Iranian cargo or heading to or from an Iranian port gets intercepted, diverted, or blocked entirely. It's a really stark division, keeping the world's economy alive while simultaneously putting an ironclad chokehold on Iran. Now, for Part 4, the 20% toll, a highly controversial financial strategy. So here is the big question. How exactly do you pay for a massive military operation like this? The administration's argument was basically, look, we've been protecting the strait for nothing, while everyone else benefits. So they announced a 20% reimbursement fee on all commercial cargo moving through the corridor. The logic was completely transactional. If American tax dollars are funding the U.S. military to act as the global guardian, the global shipping industry should foot the bill for that protection. Well, as you might imagine, the shipping industry went into a total panic. Logistics experts crunched the numbers, and they were terrifying. We're talking upwards of $30 million in extra costs for a single shipment on the largest vessels. $30 million. Shipping companies flat out said it was unworkable. Maritime groups warned it violated free transit laws, and economists started sounding the alarm about what this would do to global inflation. It was a massive shock to the system. And that leads us straight into part 5, the investment pivot, reversing the toll.
Because of that astronomical cost, the international pushback was fierce, and it triggered one of the fastest policy pivots you'll ever see. Talk about whiplash. On Monday, the U.S. drops the bomb and declares the 20% cargo toll. By Monday night, the White House is fielding direct, urgent phone calls from Gulf state kings and emirs. And by Tuesday, the toll is completely scrapped and replaced with an entirely different financial agreement.
So what happened behind closed doors? Instead of charging cargo ships, the Gulf Arab states stepped up. Countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, who rely heavily on U.S. military bases in the region and desperately need to keep exporting their own oil, agreed to essentially cover the costs themselves. But not by writing a simple check. They agreed to make massive, multi-billion-dollar trade and infrastructure investments directly into the United States. They basically bought the dome to save their own economies.
And to put this into perspective, we are talking about numbers with a T, trillions. The UAE pledged $1.4 trillion, Qatar $1.2 trillion, and Saudi Arabia $1.0 trillion in investments. That is an unbelievable amount of sovereign wealth being poured straight into the U.S. economy. It just goes to show how much leverage these Gulf allies have now. They aren't sitting on the sidelines, they're actively using their massive bank accounts to shape U.S. military strategy and protect their interests.
So as we wrap up this explainer, we really have to step back and ask, did the US just completely redefine how global military protection is bought and sold? I mean, if traditional alliances are now being replaced by a transactional system where a military shield is quite literally offset by trillions in sovereign wealth investments, what does that mean for the next global conflict? It's a huge paradigm shift, for sure, and one that's definitely going to shape the world for decades to come. Thanks for joining me today, and keep asking those big questions.